This is a story about a young guy, Taylor, the son of a god from the world of Zhao, and his spiritual beast named Shani. According to their traditions, every teenager upon reaching adulthood is sent to undergo various tests. Now Taylor and Shani are fighting a huge swarm of giant ants, but this is not a problem for our hero at all. He uses his true power of fire, and everything around him turns into ordinary ashes. To complete the test, the guy has to go down to Earth to earn 1 billion in 3 years. Taylor is absolutely confident that he can get that kind of money in just 3 months. Upon arrival on Earth, the main character goes to the bank, where, according to local residents, you can make good money. Without the proper education and without a diploma, Taylor is kicked out of there into the street. Having gathered his strength, the young man goes on a further search until his feet lead him to the local cyber club. In this place, a guy is hired as a security guard with a very inconvenient work schedule. But Taylor is not very happy with this, because in order to earn the money he needs, he will have to work for 100 years. Suddenly, our main character remembers that when he arrived on Earth, one local resident gave him a small business card about an easy way to make money. The guy takes a paper business card out of his pocket. According to the advertisement on the business card, you can earn a lot of money right while lying on the couch. Taylor decides to take on such an easy but risky job. The guy calls the phone number indicated on the business card and says that he wants to earn some money and is ready to come wherever needed. Having arrived at the indicated address, the young man enters the room, where he is sat on a chair and his hands are tied. An unfamiliar woman calms down the main character and says that if he wants to earn a lot of money, then he needs to calm down and not ask unnecessary questions. And then it finally dawned on Taylor that he had fallen into the traps of evil people as the very last loser. The hero sits on his knees between 3 thugs and thinks that they need him for experiments with some dubious drugs. Taylor's words made one bandit laugh so much that he could not restrain himself and began laughing throughout the room. They wanted to test some kind of doping on the guy, and the bandit hastened to plunge a huge syringe filled with yellow liquid into his neck. However, there was a small snag. The game from the syringe simply did not pierce Taylor's skin and broke, leaving not a trace on his neck. Seeing what happened, one of the kidnappers was very surprised, because it was impossible. The main character felt a slight tingling sensation from the needle touching his skin, and said that it was as if he had been bitten by a mosquito. One of the main bandits snatched a syringe from his colleague, reproaching him for not being able to cope with the simplest task, and headed towards the main character. The angry kidnapper swung the syringe with all his might, as if he was about to pierce Taylor's body with it. Suddenly, the main character disappears from the chair, and a moment later appears behind the kidnappers, instantly sending them to a well-deserved rest. One kidnapper stood on his feet, looked Taylor in the eyes, and told him that he had guessed that Taylor was a warrior, and only became angrier because he was right, because he hated warriors. The enraged bandit rushed at the guy and shouted that the guy would now experience the full wrath of an artificial warrior. Without blinking an eye, Taylor easily knocks out the bandit. The bandit had many wounds on his skin, and blood was coming from his mouth, through which the kidnapper said to himself that even the new reagent did not help him defeat the warrior. However, Taylor did not pay any attention to his words, because he was already heading towards the exit in order to quickly leave this ill-fated place. The guy was angry that he simply wasted his day, but he could have gone to work as a security guard at double the rate, for which he would then have been paid double the amount. Taylor was upset that his day had gone poorly and already felt a fresh breath of air as he walked out the door. Before Taylor had time to go outside, a beautiful girl immediately attacked Sarah. Unable to stand on her feet, the guy fell to the ground and screamed. The girl sat on the guy and told him not to move, otherwise he would instantly go out. The girl came so close to the guy that he couldn't help but pay attention to her magnificent breasts. The guy tried to talk to Sarah, but she told him that he could only answer her questions. The main character involuntarily tried to touch Sarah's chest with his hand, but she instantly jumped away from him. After flying a short distance, the girl successfully landed on the ground. The main character's actions took Sarah by surprise. She was a little confused and blushed with shame. An enraged Sarah walked towards Taylor to strike back. The main character did not want to fight with the girl, since hitting girls is not according to his rules. But Sarah turned out to be a very determined girl and dealt a powerful blow between Taylor's legs. The hero felt very painful because the girl hit the boy's most painful spot, as if right into the soul. Taylor became furious and told Sarah that she had made him angry for nothing. Having calmed down a little, the guy concluded that this unknown person could be an accomplice of those guys. Taylor looked at Sarah and said that she was a bad person for getting involved with those people. Sarah looked at Taylor's hands, which didn't have any silver dragon tattoos on them, and the thought struck her that he wasn't one of them. The main character got angry and wanted this girl to feel the full wrath of the Son of God. Sarah screamed in horror and asked for forgiveness. Taylor was very surprised by her words and could not understand what was happening. The girl admitted to him that she had mistakenly mistook him for those scoundrels. Sarah realized that he was a warrior after he wanted to use the fire spirit technique against her. The main character did not want to continue the conversation with Sarah anymore, so he turned around and walked away.
The girl screamed after him, asking him to stop. Taylor listened to her and stopped.
Sarah offered to help him with the money that the main character needed so much, but the girl said that she would give him money as a reward if he helped her in one matter. Taylor stared at Sarah and said that she didn't have enough money to pay him back because he needed absolutely nothing, just $1 billion. Sarah was shocked by the amount, because he wouldn't be paid that kind of money even if he defeated the War Master from the Union.
The girl desperately lowered her head.
Hearing that the main character mentioned some kind of war in her words, the guy immediately asked her whether wars get paid a lot. The girl began to tell him something about them. He looked at Taylor enthusiastically. The girl added that everyone admires them. While listening to the girl's story, the main character interrupted her, saying that he is only interested in money and the wonderful YouTube viewers who are now watching this video. So he asked them to now subscribe to the channel and leave a comment. This is very important for him, and in his thoughts he wishes everyone a good day. Sarah tried to explain to the guy that wars are not done for the sake of profit, but for the sake of justice. The main character responded to the girl's words that he was only interested in money. Looking at the guy, Sarah replied that he would not become a good warrior if he was not interested in anything else other than money. Remembering what they had talked about before, the guy asked Sarah about the amount of money she wanted to pay him for completing the task. Taylor waited for an answer from the girl. Sarah took a bank card out of her pocket and said that she only had $10,000 with her. Taylor snatched the card from the girl's hands, turned around and walked away. Taylor was delighted with the money that fell to him. Sarah ran after him, because he didn't even ask her what she had to do, but simply took the money and walked away. The main character told her that he could handle any task, because he is the son of God, which means he can cope with any task. Sarah was shocked by what she heard. The girl watched him even when he was in the basement of those bandits, and did not understand where he came from, because Taylor was very strong and knew nothing about the Union and about the warriors themselves. This alarmed Sarah. When the heroine realized who he was, she was surprised. Having told Taylor what to do, the main characters go in search of the owl. Sarah and Taylor go to a karaoke club called the Silver Dragon. Once on the dance floor, the heroes were talking about something. The girl thought that Sparrow, Owl's subordinate, should definitely be here. Looking around, the guy notices a woman with her hands tied, who is accompanied by 2 warriors. Taylor immediately recognized this woman. She turned out to be the same person who kidnapped him. Taylor and Sarah pretended to be a dancing couple so that no one would recognize them. Sarah whispered to Taylor that this was the Sparrow woman who was in contact with the owl, and it was necessary for no one to know that she and he had also taken up the search for the owl. One of the warriors turned around and looked at the dancing couple. He thought he recognized Sarah. On the street, 2 warriors were leading Sparrow to the car. Running out into the street, the main character saw that Sparrow was being taken away in a car, so they followed her. In the car, Sparrow tells the 2 warriors to let her go, as Owl will find her anyway. The man said that Owl will be dead sooner or later. Suddenly, an incomprehensible creature fell onto the hood of the car. It was a very warrior-like man sitting behind the wheel. There was a man sitting on the car with a mask on his face and sticks in the shape of wings on his back. It was an owl. The driver sharply pressed the gas and the car drove back. The owl shouted after them to stop. The 2 warriors got out of the car and went to fight the owl. Owl said that he was 10 times stronger due to the introduction of the 4th reagent, so he could easily defeat them. The owl quietly crept up to the man and, standing behind him, told him that now he began to perceive him differently. But what did these words mean? Sarah and Taylor, meanwhile, arrived at the scene. The guys saw an overturned car from which came words for help. The heroes immediately rushed to help and saw Sparrow in the car. Sarah told him to help her. In the meantime, she will go in search of Owl, who should be here somewhere. Taylor looked at Sparrow. The woman recognized Taylor and asked what he needed. The guy raised his finger up and said that he would save her if she paid him for it. Sarah, meanwhile, ran to look for the owl. Hiding, the girl watched the owl, who dealt with 2 wars. The girl immediately realized that she would not stand aside in such a difficult time and decided to help them. Owl's well-developed sense of smell immediately gave him a signal that someone was watching him from the outside. Sarah ran out of hiding and screamed at him to let them go at that very second, otherwise she would greatly regret it. The owl turned around, looked at her with a disapproving look, and at the same second made an attacking lunge, which immediately achieved its goal. He considered Sarah an insignificant person and compared her to prey, and not the most difficult one. Directing his hand to the force that grabbed Sarah, he shouted that she was about to die an ordinary human death. His powerful force hurt the girl so much that her eyes even turned red, and tears involuntarily appeared. Within a second, Sarah's body collapsed to the ground. She did not make a sound. Owl, meanwhile, returned to his confrontation with the warriors. One of them flew towards the owl. Unexpectedly for everyone, Sarah reincarnated. The girl began to look like a real monster. The 2 warriors remembered this girl. saying that it was she who then helped the owl escape. The warriors wanted to hide in order to call for reinforcements. The warrior girl began to use her powers, and a dome of thick fog began to form around her. Owl wanted to stop them.
The warriors managed to escape.
Meanwhile, Sparrow told Taylor that the Union noticed her organization a year ago, which is why she was forced to hide. The woman continued, saying that she was now too weak to resist the Union. Taylor thought about something. After listening to Sparrow's story, the guy told her that now she is on her own. Taylor walked away from the woman, who shouted after him that she would tell him valuable information about his companion. The guy stopped abruptly at her words. He was interested. Sparrow told him that Sarah was inoculated with the 6th reagent, after which she survived. The woman concluded that this girl could be the king of the dragons, since she was able to survive after being administered the drug. Taylor didn't expect to hear this about Sarah. Sparrow said that the drugs that are administered to people not only make them stronger, but also turn them into bloodthirsty killers. For such valuable information, Sparrow wants Taylor to save her, because the Union can pay him well for such information. Meanwhile, Sarah and Owl stood and looked at each other. Immediately, the girl takes off and runs straight towards the owl. Sarah wants to stab him, but Owl confronts her. Looking at the girl, the hero says that her strength is still too weak to defeat him. Sarah, not losing hope, tries to strike him again and swings her leg with all her might, aiming straight for his head. However, Owl easily blocks the blow, grabbing Sarah's leg with both hands. Sarah realized that the attack didn't work, and now she needs to come up with something. The girl tries to hit the owl with her second leg. Such a move should take him by surprise. But she immediately realized that Owl's reaction was too fast, and this blow would not reach its target. Owl strikes back, blocking Sarah's attack with his other leg, seemingly without any difficulty. The girl falls to the ground and shows no signs of life, and Owl laughs because he was still jealous of her potential. Sarah hears Owl telling her that with her help they might no longer fear the Union.
At the same instant, a frantic force bursts out of the girl, enveloping her and lifting her into the air.
She turned into a creature with white hair, long claw-like nails and spikes sticking out from under her skin. Now Owl wants the girl in her new appearance to show him what she's now capable of. Standing opposite each other, Owl tells Sarah that now they can create a world without weak people, a world in which there will be many new warriors. The girl feels that someone is touching her. Taylor is standing behind Sarah. The girl turned around and pushed him away. This caused the hero to fly several meters away. The main character saw that the girl had lost her mind, so she did not understand what she was doing now. The owl drew attention to the unknown guy and asked what the hell he was doing. Sarah is Taylor's source of income, so the main character warned Owl that if he touched the girl, he would have an affair with him. Sarah takes off and runs at Taylor, not realizing who is in front of her and with whom she really must fight. The owl wastes no time and also carries out its attack with air spikes. Dozens of needles flew towards Taylor, leaving no chance to dodge. The guy uses his firepower and still dodges. The hero swings up and realizes that Sarah has lost her mind and will fight indiscriminately with anyone who comes to her hand. After doing a double somersault in the air, Sarah tries to catch up with him. The main character escapes all attacks and begins to catch his breath. The owl has no idea who this young man is or how he got such an ability because he dodged all the attacks. Taylor immediately declares that he is not a warrior, but now he intends to fight seriously. Now, as if something had changed in the hero's eyes, he concentrated heavily and a tense atmosphere reigned in the air. Taylor was enveloped in a purple aura, which emitted force discharges and created the impression that it was about to crush everything around him. Literally out of thin air, the guy pulled out a huge sword which literally shone from the power stored inside it. Without any control over herself, Sarah rushed at Taylor from behind. But the main character instantly catches the attack and turns his gaze to the attacking Sarah. The girl's instinct constrained her body. She froze and stopped because she felt a force that was several times greater than her. Owl looked at Taylor and assessed the situation, which had suddenly turned against him. However, the green-eyed one is still confident in his strength and rushes into the attack with his signature aerial move. Owl tries to strike, but Taylor, thanks to his strength, prevents him from doing so. He's shocked by Taylor's abilities and tries to find his weak point. The guy looks at the owl with glowing red eyes and says that even the air melts from his fire energy, so any attacks against him are useless. It was Taylor's next turn to attack. The powerful blow causes the owl to lose its balance. After the entire battle, Sova lost one arm and was left without his mask on his face. Taylor wants Owl to be dead as soon as possible, since he will be paid for him, to which Owl told him not to even think about it. Putting a mask on his face, the guy asked how he could return Sarah to her previous appearance. He answered him that the power inside the girl should calm down on its own. Taylor continued to look at the girl through the mask. Sarah grabbed her head with her hands. Memories of last year suddenly began to visit her. The girl began to remember that she was lying quietly on the bed and sleeping soundly. Suddenly something strange happened to the girl. Sarah turned into a real monster. Having moved away a little from the memories, Sarah could not understand how this could happen. and she began to remember further. Sarah is sitting and holding a soft toy on her lap, when suddenly she notices that someone is extending their hand to her. The unknown man tells her that he will take her home. There are many small children living in this house, of whom he cares very much. But once a year he injected them with an unknown drug, saying that with its help they would become strong. The girl wanted to know how the young children were living in the new family, but the director was not interested in talking about it. Returning from her memories, Sarah realized that Al was the same unknown man in whose house she lived, but what happened to the rest of the children? To the girl's thoughts, Al replied that those children had been dead for a long time, and laughed loudly. Sarah didn't expect to hear this. Later, Sova added that they all died because they could not withstand the action of the reagent that was injected into them. The owl, looking at the girl, expects that she, shocked by his words, will attack him, and he turns out to be right because Sarah takes off and rushes straight at him. It pierces his body right through, causing critical damage that is absolutely incompatible with life. However, this is all Owl needed. A sincere smile appears on his face. Already lying on the ground, he sees that Taylor is looking at him with burning eyes. Owl thinks to himself that this guy can replace him. After the battle, Taylor grabs Sarah by the shoulder and tells them to leave, since the task is completed. Sarah jumps to the side and Taylor looks at her with a blank look. Bowing her head, the girl tells him not to approach her or look in her direction. According to the girl, she looks disgusting, so he shouldn't see her like that. To her words, Taylor replies that she looks very attractive. The girl's gaze softens and she looks tenderly at the guy. Right before our eyes, her appearance begins to change and Sarah's consciousness returns. She again takes on a natural human appearance. Taylor suggests that since Sarah truly does not remember anything, then she does not actually control her power. On the contrary, the power controls her. Standing opposite each other, Taylor tells the girl that there is no king of dragons and is very indignant because it was Sarah who killed the owl, and not he, and now he will not see any reward from the union. The girl decides to ask the guy something else, but she seems embarrassed to do it right away and waits for approval from the main character. Angry, Taylor asks her to first settle accounts with him for Owl. The hero turned around, thoughtful, and Sarah began to say that she would pay him this month, and every month she would give him part of her earnings. The guy agrees, and the main characters leave the scene. Sova was left wounded lying on the ground. An unknown girl appears before Owl lying on the ground. The owl was alive because of a reagent containing holothurian cells introduced into his body. The stranger looks at Owl and says whether they should continue to cooperate if he was crippled by his own man. Meanwhile, two of the fleeing warriors manage to return. They stand and talk about how they need to call for help. Suddenly they notice something strange in the air. In front of them stood a girl with blue hair, who later introduced herself as Olivia, who volunteered to help the warriors. The owl did not at all expect that Sarah would attack him. It was a pure accident. Olivia looked at him and said that even the wars that escaped back then don't know who that guy is. Owl thought. The owl, bowing his head, replied that he was worried that this young man had appeared out of nowhere. From what Owl saw with his own eyes, he told Olivia that the guy was no ordinary person. Olivia thought Taylor might be a foreigner. Looking at the girl, Owl replied that it was still difficult to talk about who he was. Yawning, Olivia said that she would find out more about this guy, and for now the owl could find a shelter and hide there well. Looking at her watch, the girl was horrified because she had missed the time that was in her plans. The girl decides to quickly go home. Thinking about the girl's words, Owl decides to hide in the abandoned places. Shawnee is sleeping peacefully in the guard room and waiting for her owner. The pet jumps off abruptly, saying that Taylor didn't tell him where he was going. He just stroked me before saying goodbye and left. His father told me to look after him. Suddenly, the door began to open. Sarah and Taylor stood on the threshold. The girl did not at all expect that he lived in a closet. As soon as the girl entered, she saw a fluffy animal lying on the sofa. Her eyes widened, and Sarah rushed to him, calling him a cute little sheep. Having grabbed the animal, the girl immediately embraced it and began to caress it. The animal did not really like it. Taylor looked at this picture sweetly and said that he had never heard anyone call the spiritual beast a cute little lamb. Shawnee broke free from the girl's hand and ran somewhere. The girl ran after him, but when she caught up with him, she did not understand what was happening to the animal. Her eyes became even bigger when the girl saw who Shawnee had turned into. The pet turned into a terrible monster that looked at Sarah with a grin. In fact, it seemed to the animal that the girl saw him as a terrible and powerful beast, but Sarah saw him as the same cute and small pet. Having caught up with the girl and his furry friend who ran out into the street, Taylor told the animal to stop scaring the girl, because her strength was not yet fully developed to feel its full power. Hearing the guy's words, the animal tiredly lay down on the ground, saying that he had simply spent all his strength. Upon learning that the animal could talk, Sarah was shocked. Taylor explained to the girl that his animal mistook Sarah for something paranormal, which is why he reacted this way. Taylor approached his pet and told him to apologize to the girl, because whether they would be fed depended on her money. The animal approached the girl and asked for forgiveness. From everything that was happening around, Sarah lost consciousness. Taylor and Shani looked at the girl. The main character picked her up and carried her back to his closet. Suddenly, the spiritual beast screamed sharply. Before Taylor had time to take a few steps, something terrible began to appear from the ground. His guard room from the ground was surrounded by sharp teeth. Suddenly, a creature that looked like a large snake crawled out of the ground, but this monster had several pairs of sharp teeth around its head. Taylor saw that this monster had destroyed his home. Taylor, with Sarah in his arms, quickly ran away from there. The girl opened her eyes and did not understand where she was. Looking around, Sarah realized that she was in a hotel room, but she had no idea how she got there. Suddenly, the girl heard Taylor's voice, wishing her good morning. Sarah turned her head sharply towards him and looked at him with a blank look because she really didn't understand what he was doing here. The girl was embarrassed by this behavior of the guy, so extraneous thoughts began to come into her head. Taylor explained this by saying that if his shelter had not been destroyed by that monster, he would now be sleeping peacefully there. Then the guy added that he was not interested in the girl. Sarah grinned. There was a slight silence between them. After a few minutes, Sarah decided to take an interest and find out more about this monster. Without waiting for an answer from the guy, the girl took the remote control in her hand and turned on the TV. The girl came across a news channel, which just said that the city was attacked by unknown creatures. Sarah decides to fight the monsters. The girl turns to the guy. She tells him to train her so that she too can discover an ability that will help her cope with monsters. The main character answered her that before starting training, he must be paid for a past task completed. Therefore, the heroes go to the main office of the Union. Already anticipating how much he would be paid for the owl, Taylor was happy. The girl looked at Taylor angrily. She became increasingly convinced that of all the values in the world, Taylor was only interested in money. Sarah could not understand Taylor in one situation. He behaves friendly, even ready to help. But as soon as it comes to money, he becomes very mercantile. The girl was brought out of her thoughts by Taylor's voice, who told her that she needed to go faster. Otherwise, he might not have time to receive the reward. The main characters began to climb the stairs. Suddenly, someone called out to Sarah, to which the girl turned her head and was very surprised. Olivia stood in front of them. Sarah was very happy to see Olivia. The girl became interested in who this young man was next to Sarah, to which the girl replied that he was an acquaintance of hers, whose name was Taylor. Olivia was immediately interested in this young man and wanted to know more about him. For some reason, the girl thought that he was a warrior from another city. Sarah explained to her that he works as a security guard near the supermarket. Olivia was very surprised by this. Taylor couldn't understand why this girl was so interested in him. Olivia thought that the more he told about himself, the faster she would find out who he was. Continuing the conversation between themselves, Olivia wanted to know why they came here, to which Sarah replied that Taylor was wondering how much he would be paid for the owl. Olivia sadly replied that Taylor would not receive anything, since the owl was already dead later. The girl asked Sarah for forgiveness for the fact that she could not find the owl, because of which innocent children died. Sarah, bowing her head, said that it was not her fault. Olivia began to say goodbye to the guys, saying that it was time for her to go. Looking at Olivia, Sarah said that she wanted to join the Union, to which Olivia replied that to join, she would need to pass small tests. Taylor interrupts their conversation and starts talking about money again. Olivia decides to approach Taylor. She comes close to him and whispers something in his ear. The guy was horrified by the words. The girl said he didn't expect this. After talking with Olivia, Sarah and Taylor went home. Noticing that the guy is walking thoughtfully, Sarah decides to ask him what's the matter. The guy did not say that Olivia invited him to spend the night with her, but he asked the girl how old Olivia was, to which Sarah replied that she would soon turn 40. The girl thought that Olivia looked younger than her peers because she takes good care of herself, so apparently she doesn't age. Taylor put his hand on his chin and thought about something. Remembering that the guy has absolutely nowhere to live, Sarah invites him to live with her for now. Taylor agrees as long as she doesn't charge him rent. The girl was furious that he lost his manners after the conversation started about money. The main characters came to Sarah's house. Sarah pointed the guest to the sofa on which he could sit for now. Having settled down on the sofa, the guy looked up at the girl and said that she had much more space than his guard room. After some thought, Taylor decided that he would live with Sarah until he found a new job. The girl was not against this turn of events. Taylor looked at his earring, which was emitting light. From the earring, Shani was formed, which quickly settled on the lap of its owner. Sarah approached the animal and stroked it. The girl was glad that this spiritual beast was not discovered by the warriors. Otherwise, they would now have a lot of problems. Turning to Taylor, the girl tells him that if he had joined the Union, Shani would not have to hide every time they go somewhere. The guy did not expect this from her, because she herself once told him that someone like him, who constantly thinks only about money, has no place among the warriors. Then Sarah herself decides to reveal her inner strengths, and therefore asks Taylor to help her with this.
The guy begins to tell her that there are many energies, by mastering which you can acquire an extraordinary ability.
Taylor says he has energy associated with fire techniques. The main character begins to clearly demonstrate his ability to Sarah. Sarah was very surprised. Looking down, Taylor said that you cannot rely only on spiritual strength if you want to win.
Sarah raised her finger to the sky and said that before human warriors did not possess spiritual powers, but used martial arts to fight.
Before he could finish his conversation with Sarah, Taylor suddenly felt something. Someone used the magic of their watch to watch Taylor and Sarah through it. A glowing circle with an eye in the center formed between Olivia's fingers on her palm. A guy and a girl stood in the middle of the room and talked. Olivia saw Shawnee sleeping on the couch and realized that he was a spiritual beast, which meant Taylor was a scent scout. Taylor turned his head to the side and fixed his gaze somewhere. Olivia didn't like that he noticed her. The hero realized that he was being followed. Taylor pulled his head back and looked at his shoulder. On his shoulder was a circle with an eye in the center, from which some kind of energy emanated. Taylor thought that Olivia might have activated it when she came close to him and whispered something in his ear. The guy touched the sign with his hand as it began to disappear. Having never seen anything like this before, Sarah wanted to take a closer look, so she walked almost close to Taylor. Sarah's eyes were almost level with Taylor's lips. The heroes stood so close to each other that just a few more seconds and their lips would have touched. Having come to her senses, the girl sharply pushes the guy away from her. The hero was surprised by the girl's action. The girl felt ashamed. Taylor later admitted that this situation was simply an accident. An awkward silence fell between the heroes. Sarah continues the conversation first and wants Taylor to teach her how to master energy. Scratching his head, Taylor said that he could not teach her his fire techniques. The girl didn't understand why, to which Taylor replied that all people are different, which means that everyone's abilities are also different. Lowering his head, the guy thought that since Sarah had the blood of the spiritual beast, it meant that she would be able to feel the energy in herself. The girl looks at the guy and asks him what needs to be done to feel the natural strength in himself. To do this, you need to close your eyes and listen to the sensations, which is what Sarah did. Plunging deep into herself, the girl tried to feel at least something. Taylor stood and looked at the girl who was trying to discover a certain gift in herself. Suddenly, Sarah exclaimed that she had found the ability in herself. Taylor was very surprised. Sarah was also very surprised that she was able to reveal her ability in such a short time. Taylor praised himself for the fact that a good teacher always produces good students. The guy approaches the girl with an unsure gait and asks her to show him what she was able to discover. Meanwhile, Olivia is standing by a large window talking to someone on the phone. She is informed that she must follow Taylor and Sarah. The girl stands and ponders what she should do next. Olivia gets the idea that she should visit Sarah again. Taylor looked at Sarah with his mouth open. Sarah showed Taylor her ability, which drained a lot of her strength. Putting his hands in his pockets, the hero emphasized that Sarah is very weak due to the small amount of internal energy in her. Sarah began to suspect that something was wrong with her ability. Taylor explained to the girl that her ability is the sphere of omniscience, and it is given to few people except his father, who also had such an ability. The girl was amazed. The guy began to have doubts about whether Sarah was his father's illegitimate daughter. Taylor's father had an affair with a woman when he arrived on Earth. Sarah tells him that this is all nonsense. Taylor continued to be tormented by doubts. The girl told him that he was paranoid and should see a psychiatrist. Someone knocked on their door, and Taylor turned his head at the sound. Sarah went to open the door. The girl did not expect to see this man at all. Olivia came to her house. Olivia said hello and said she was very happy to see Taylor for the third time. Sarah was surprised by her words. She did not understand why Olivia said that they met 3 times when they only met twice. Olivia raised her hand to her face and said she was wrong. Taylor began to suspect something. Sarah looked at Olivia and told her it was a good thing she came because she was going to come see her tomorrow. Olivia asked why she was going to come, to which Sarah told her that she wanted to show her her ability. The girl began to show her what she could learn. Olivia was very surprised because she had never seen this before. The girl felt as if hundreds of eyes were looking at her at the same time. An incredible energy emanated from Sarah, which filled the entire space around. Having shown her ability, the girl exhaled. Olivia wondered what kind of ability Sarah had. Having learned about the girl's ability from Taylor, who can wield the energy of the sphere of omniscience, Olivia was shocked. Taylor said that the ability that Sarah has is invincible and legendary. Putting his hands in his pocket, the hero was planning something. Sarah saw that Taylor had disappeared somewhere from the place where he had just stood. The guy approached Sarah from behind and said that the level of preparation of her body was still very weak to quickly react to what was happening around. The girl began to get annoyed by this. Sarah turned around and hit Taylor in the head, which caused a big lump to appear on the guy's forehead. While the guys were fooling around, Olivia thought that Sarah might not be able to fully use her ability. But in a battle with the enemy, her energy could be of great use. Olivia decides to invite Sarah to join their union. Sarah was delighted at the offer, so she flew up to Olivia and pulled her into a hug. Lay your head on top of Sarah's head, Olivia told her not to rejoice ahead of time, because in order to join the union, she would need to pass an exam from 3 examiners. Pulling away, Olivia was confident that Sarah would handle everything. Looking at Taylor, the girl added that he too would soon join the union since his spiritual beast could be destroyed. Taylor thought Olivia was threatening him. Olivia assured him that she had no need to do this, and then added that if he joined the union, then he could be paid $3 million for his deal with the owl. At the proposed amount, Taylor's jaw dropped and he seemed to already feel the money in his pocket. Olivia grinned and immediately realized how much Taylor was interested in money. Taylor flew up to the girl and drool began to fly from his mouth in different directions. Olivia was a little embarrassed and took a couple of steps back, not understanding what her beloved protagonist could do to her now. The guy grabbed the girl's leg and asked to get him into the union. His desire was so sincere and strong that it seems he would never let go of that leg in his life. The girl was amused by Taylor's game, and a satisfied smile appeared on her face. Olivia warned the guys that the next exam will be in 3 days, and she is worried about Sarah, as she may fail the exam due to the fact that her powers are still too weak. Sarah was alarmed by her words, and her eyes opened so wide that they resembled 2 large white moons. Taylor turns his back to the ladies and slowly makes his way to the sofa. The guy puts his hands on the head of the spiritual beast and strokes it kindly. Bright energy begins to emanate from Shani. The animal immediately pierces the girl and takes possession of her. Sarah felt that her strength had noticeably increased, and her reserves of energy and endurance had increased. Taylor looked at Sarah and said that the animal would give her strength and help her cope with the tasks on the exam. Sarah decides to try the power that has appeared in her. She chose Taylor as the source of her experiment, who clearly did not like the girl's idea. Olivia wished the heroes good luck in the upcoming exam. 3 days later, Sarah and Taylor went to the union to take exams. The first task began, and a certain man called the cadets to test their physical fitness. Taylor went first and began to demonstrate his strength. A stone flew at him from above, which Taylor easily broke into small pieces. Enthusiastic screams from the audience could be heard in the hall. While Sarah stood and ate ice cream, Taylor went through the second task. An enthusiastic cry could still be heard in the hall. Subdued by Taylor's strength, some of the cadets began to leave, deciding that they could not pass the test, since they were very weak. Taylor successfully completed physical training. The guy saw Sarah, who was just given a test. The hero thought that this might be Olivia's doing. The first stage of the exam began, and the first examiner was a man named George. George told the cadets that they could use anything to defeat him and must show their best. After his words, the man increased his speed 5 times. The examiner immediately attacked Taylor, but he managed to dodge, praising his opponent for his speed. George glanced at Sarah standing next to him and chose her as his new target. He flew up to her to use force, but at the last moment the girl disappeared from her place, leaving only the pleasant aroma of her perfume. The girl appeared behind the examiner, who was surprised at the speed of her movements. A guy named Steve was the next to take the test, but his stomach had a hard time, because the examiner's powerful blow left a noticeable hematoma under his t-shirt. A girl with the beautiful name Bella followed him. Her attack did not achieve its intended goal, but forced the examiner to retreat. The girl with long white hair, whose name is Emma, continued the test. She released prickly thorns and the examiner had to dodge. Each of the cadets completed the task, after which George decides to increase his speed another 10 times, and there was great tension in the air. Harry was the first to go into the fight. He got serious and came up with a small plan for his attack. Using his gigantism, the guy attacked with a huge fist. George turns out to be much faster than him and immediately moves behind Harry. George elbows Harry, having already whispered in his ear that he will be eliminated from this test. However, Harry was confident that he could defeat him, because he had a plan for such a maneuver from the examiner. He turns his hand around, using his huge fist as a defense rather than an attack, and he succeeds. Emma is a little sad, because she expected to see the real strength of the examiner, but he does not want to give his best because he is sparing the cadets. The examiner is amazed at the impudence of this girl, so he wants her to surprise him and increases her strength another 50 times. The man rushes at the girl so quickly that none of those present literally notice this maneuver. Emma is amazed at George's speed, realizing that she seems to have just gotten herself into big trouble. Stopping in front of the girl, the examiner shows with all his appearance that she should prepare for his attack, because now everything will be very serious and will attack her in a split second. From such an attack, the girl falls to the ground and blood is gushing from her mouth. She simply did not even see how the examiner moved. For her, everything happened in one moment. But Emma pulls herself together and decides to show him what she can do. Purple thorns began to burst out of the ground, similar to tree roots, but many times stronger than them. Having used her ability, the girl goes into battle, encouraging herself. Harry is amazed that Emma decided to push the examiner, because of which they will all be screwed. Surrounded by purple roots, the girl stands in front of George and tells him that now she will fight back, and it will be unpleasant. The extremely calm appearance of the examiner excited her and even led her to some confusion, but there was no turning back. George picked up a small stone and asked Emma if she wanted to know what could be done with a small piece of earth, having great strength behind her. George looked at the girl and held a stone in his hand, waiting for an answer. But Emma never answered, and the examiner threw the stone with such force that it flew and cut the girl's purple roots in half. George was forced to call for medical help, because he admitted that he might have overdone the attack a little. The blow was so strong that Emma was slammed into the wall. She was unconscious and collapsed to the ground. Seeing the girl's condition, Steve became afraid that he might not complete the test with George. Looking at Taylor, Sarah told him that they could not defeat the examiner, to which the guy replied that even with such power, he did not pose a danger. Harry decided to find out if Emma's ordeal was over. George sends Harry to check the girl's condition if she turns out to be alive. Then we can safely take her to the Union. The man was dissatisfied that the examiner answered Emma so strongly that I could simply kill her because after all the main goal is to enter the Union and not a battle to the death. Raising his voice, the examiner told Harry that if he was not satisfied with something, he could calmly leave and take the exam. To his words, the man replied that he did not intend to leave, since he very much wanted to join the Union. After looking at the remaining cadets, George decides to increase his powers several more times due to the fact that they angered him. The examiner looks at Harry, thinking that his ability is to make his arm bigger, so he wants to see what the man can do. Harry attacks George with his huge arms. The examiner begins to carry out gradual attacks, but their power begins to grow with each blow, causing Harry's hands to go numb, and he realizes that he will not last even a minute at this pace. When Harry's arm goes completely numb, George lunges and stops the blow right in front of Harry's chin, telling him to rest. The man looks at Steve, who will be next. Steve's ability is to increase in size several times, but when Steve's strength is at 0, he cannot use this technique normally and loses consciousness, and his body becomes very thin and pale. He could not even hit the examiner, and he also advises him to rest. The next one to fight was Bella, whose ability to cause a shockwave that destroys everything around. But the examiner refused to fight with her since her strength is nothing compared to him. After which the examiner turns his gaze to Sarah because he has not yet fought with her in full. He instantly moves behind her, intending to deliver a critical blow with the element of surprise. And so it happened, a strong blow from which stones fly in different directions, but it seems miss. The girl manages to react and, using her ability, moves in the other direction. George cannot understand what the girl's ability is connected with, so he increases his strength several times more. Sarah began to lose track of her opponent's movements, which led the examiner to conclude that her ability was related to her reaction to movements. George wants to fully find out what her strength is connected to. Watching Sarah from the side, Taylor decides to help her, as he understands that she will fail the test if the examiner finds out their secret with the spirit pet that has possessed her. The man flies towards the girl, intending to deal a serious blow. Taylor appears right between them and throws a punch right into the path of the examiner's attack. George is unhappy that the hero did not wait for his turn and dared to attack him without permission. Looking at Taylor, the examiner wants him to surprise him, so George will gradually lower his speed limits to see if Taylor can handle him. The man orders Taylor not to disappoint him, as the test has just returned to normal. Taylor asks the examiner to stop. George suggests that the guy needs time to prepare his abilities for combat. The man decides to meet him halfway and gives him 1 minute for all the preparations. After a minute, the examiner warns that time is up and activates his power. Taylor agrees with George's statement, a small grin creeping onto his face as if this was his plan. Harry adjusted his glasses. The man does not understand what is about to happen. Taylor and George prepare for battle. Harry realized that Taylor stood up for Sarah for a reason. The man says that if the girl had not lasted 5 minutes in the fight, as was said at the beginning of the test, then she would have failed the exam. While the guys were talking, the examiner was already preparing for his final attack and was sure that the end of the test would come right now. George was angry that he only had a second to hit Taylor because after 5 minutes the remaining guys were winning. Suddenly something began to appear from the ground, causing the men to freeze in surprise. A man in a purple suit emerged from the ground. This was the second black rank examiner named Bob, who immediately began to congratulate the guys on successfully completing the stage. Bob scolded George for breaking the rules and asked him to cool down, because his test was over and any further actions were no longer acceptable. George leaves, leaving the cadets to go through the second stage with Bob. Sarah walked up to Taylor from behind, and in a quiet voice told him thank you for his help. Sticking his finger up his nose, the guy replied that he didn't want to help her out, but wanted to evaluate the strength of the first examiner. The girl was amazed by his answer, because it was a little different from what she expected to hear. Bob turned to the guys, asking them not to be angry with George, because inside he is a good person. It's just that his work forces him to be an evil person for others. The second examiner snapped his fingers and asked those present to listen carefully. Bob explained to the guys that George was acting so rudely because he wanted to weed out weak players, because these are difficult times, and even beginners who have just passed the exam are sent to fight monsters. Now Harry realized that the examiner's actions towards Emma were not overly cruel. He just wanted to protect her from possible death on the task, because they were extremely dangerous. With a thumbs up, the second examiner announced the start of the next round. Bob commanded the cadets to look up. He pointed to the TV that hung on the ceiling. There was an image on the TV that showed a moving train, and people tied to the rails. Bob gave the task to choose where the train would turn, where there was 1 person or 5. Looking at the TV and listening to the task, Harry was horrified. Bella expressed her opinion. She said that it is better to save 4 at the cost of 1. In response to her words, Bob asked if she was sure of her choice. Sarah spoke next. She said that no matter who you choose, you will still become a killer. Harry and Steve were beginning to feel there was some kind of catch in this task. Steve is thinking about giving up this game. Harry asks Taylor what he thinks about this. Everyone immediately turned their heads to Taylor, waiting for his answer. Taking his chin, the hero began to think. Suddenly he declares that he would bet on a miracle. Bob doesn't know what he means. Taylor explains that there is no choice here. They have abilities thanks to which they could try to stop the train, and what the result will be is not up to them. The examiner laughed at his words. Looking into Taylor's eyes, Bob said that he didn't take Taylor's opinion for an answer. The examiner waits for everyone to answer. Taylor begins to get annoyed by this, because the solution to the riddle turned out to be not so simple. Bob is serious and pushes subjects to make a decision as quickly as possible. Sarah cries out, saying that whatever we choose will be unfair to others. The examiner says that there is always a choice, and if it is difficult for them to make a decision, they can transfer the right of choice to someone else and take the place of the one they choose. You just need to make the right decision, the examiner said, as if it were such an elementary thing. There are no answers from the cadets for a long time, so Bob decides to push them on his own. The examiner creates a huge clock out of thin air and sits directly on it, informing them that they have very little time left for the final answer. Sarah pursed her lips, wants to express her version, but cannot firmly understand whether it is really suitable in this situation. The girl raises her voice and says that she wants to leave this game right now without giving any answer. Harry stops Sarah and says that this is not the best option, because the examiner may turn it so that others will have to make a choice for her, which will only make the situation worse. Sarah is trying to understand what the true meaning of this test is. There must be some secret, a loophole or something on the surface that they do not notice. Smiling, Taylor said that he understood the essence of the task. Pointing his fingers at Sarah, the hero says that he wants to leave the girl in this test. Bob makes this decision by praising the guy. The examiner is also informed that the right to choose also works in the opposite direction. Taylor is trying to figure something out. Suddenly, Harry is struck by a thought. He says that every person has a choice, but sometimes our choice can harm another person. Steve concludes that whoever the majority elects will be eliminated. It is difficult to attach significance to this, since Bob's true motives are not clear. The examiner warned them to make their choice quickly. Sarah became very angry. The girl said that she would not make a choice, even if the price for this was dropping out of the game. Bobo wants the girl to think about her choice. Taylor asked the examiner to finish his games, which surprised Bob. The hero looks at Bob and says that the point of the task is to test insight, and not for us to suspect each other. The examiner did not understand why Taylor came to this conclusion. Taylor explained this by saying that each examiner has 5 minutes to complete the task, but choosing to kill 5 people in favor of 5 minutes is wrong. The hero came to the conclusion that Bob was deliberately misleading them, so that together they would decide their own lives. Putting his hands in his pocket, Taylor said that if they acted in good faith, they would pass the test. The hero did not understand why. When he had to make a choice, the examiner showed his watch. He also did not understand why. When Sarah wanted to leave the game, Bob also pointed to the clock. Taylor later added that the examiner should determine whether a person passed or failed at the end of the test. Bob praised Taylor for his brilliant mind. Scratching his head, the examiner said that Taylor had come to the right choice, which others could not think of. Since the guys did not pass the test, Bob decided to weed them out from the next stage. Steve was terribly upset that he would not be able to join the Union team of warriors because of his failure in the exam. Laughing at the situation, Bob said that it was a joke, that no one goes anywhere and continues the exam. Closing his eyes, the examiner added to his words that only the one who chose another player, and not himself, leaves, and whoever refused the choice also intends to leave. Sarah thinks that Bob will kick her out, since she was practically going to leave the game if Taylor hadn't stopped her. With a wave of his coat, the examiner congratulated all the winners who were heading to the final exam. And having said goodbye, he disappeared. Harry breathed a sigh of relief, glad that he had passed the test. Sarah looked at Taylor, who had his eyes glued to the floor, thinking about something. The guy claims that there is some hidden meaning in all these tests, because the examiners give them for a reason. Harry responds to his words that based on the results of all rounds, the examiners choose the strongest, and the weak ones leave the game. Harry ponders what his decision would be if he ever found himself in a similar situation. What would he choose? The heroes are waiting for the third and final test, which still does not begin, although a whole hour has passed since Bob left them. Steve is outraged by this turn of events. For some reason, the man puts his hand in his mouth, begins to increase in size. Steve did this to regain strength, which will be useful to him for the next stage. Taylor looks at him and cannot understand how thin or fat he really is. Grinning, Steve states that he is quite large. Harry, looking at the guys, says that they have been through so much together and still don't know each other's names. Later, the man says that it would be better if they come up with nicknames for themselves, since real warriors only use them. Raising her hand, Bella states that she has a nickname. Joyfully, the girl proclaims to be called the Queen of Devastation. At Bella's nickname, Taylor bursts out laughing. Sarah slaps the hero, saying that it's not nice to laugh at others. Bella cried. Sarah rushed to calm her down, to which the girl looked menacingly at Taylor. Showing his huge hand, Harry said to be called Baboon. Shyly, Sarah talked about her lack of a nickname and asked the guys to just call her Sarah. Taylor said that he is the son of God, but the guys can just call him Taylor if they feel comfortable. Harry about Taylor's ostentation, since warriors must inspire trust in people. The heroes froze in bewilderment. Huge human hands began to break out of the ground. Later, something resembling a human body began to appear, and then the head of a real monster appeared. The monster was several dozen times the size of the heroes themselves. The third examiner, Olivia, appeared and told the heroes that this was their final task, during which they needed to defeat the monsters in 10 minutes. Taylor used their fire technique. Olivia grins at the guy. Sarah is horrified when she sees the monsters recovering from Taylor's powerful attack. The monster looks back, where the hero with a burning hand stands with his back to him. The monster prepares to strike, but Taylor manages to escape. At this time, George comes into Olivia's office. The girl asks him how he feels after the fight with Taylor. George is surprised how Olivia knows him, because this guy doesn't fit their requirements at all. Looking into George's eyes, the girl was discouraged by his answer. George squeezed his hand tightly in anger. The man said that if Bob had not distracted him, he would have taught Taylor a lesson. Taking hold of her hair, Olivia said that he could be ambassador headquarters in order to see how the union works. The girl came close to George and added that the headquarters wanted to break them. The man angrily replied that he did not care about the headquarters. Olivia began to walk away, her heels clicking. The girl, leaving, added that she would not need to defend her rights later when Taylor joined them in the union. Olivia stopped, looking at the floor. She was surprised by what George finally said to her. Turning over her shoulder, the girl said that this was her personal opinion about this whole situation. Closing his eyes, George said that he would not interfere in all this. Taylor stood behind the big giant. The guy is getting ready to strike. Seeing the guy's actions, Olivia smirks again. The giant's hand fights back against Taylor. The guy was nailed to the wall. He grabbed his neck in pain. It occurred to Taylor that this test also had some meaning. Sarah is concerned about Taylor's condition. The guy was not feeling well, complaining of lack of strength. Taylor is going to take a break and then join the guys. Standing directly at the giant, Olivia watches them from above. Meanwhile, Harry decides to find the monster's weak point. Sarah suggested the idea of attacking the giant from different angles. Harry, adjusting his glasses, agreed with her. The guys went into battle. Olivia goes downstairs to see what the heroes are up to. The girl warned about the time limit. Taylor sat on the sidelines while the guys tried to complete the task. Harry enlarges his hand several times. Steve increased in size hundreds of times. Bella jumped to the ground hard, causing everything around her to shake. Sarah's ability wasn't that strong, so she didn't know what to do. The girl decides to do everything in her power. Sarah springs into action. He hit the giant with his fist. The giant turns out to be very heavy, causing Sarah to almost break her arm. The guys stand and watch. It seemed as if the monster had died alive. Steve was even happy about it. But the children's joy did not last long as the monsters began to come to life. Harry squatted down and said that he had a certain idea. He shared with the guys about the wonderful property of sand, which heals the wounds of giants. The man noticed that the entire room was made of sand. Sarah came to the conclusion that the giant will regenerate as long as there is sand in the room. Looking up at Harry, Bella asked how they could keep the monster from touching the ground. The man thought about her question. Harry exclaimed that it would be difficult to defeat him because neither of them had the ability to levitate. Bella made a face. Out of despair, the guys did not know what to do. They had very little time left until the end of the test. Taylor is thinking about filing this case since they can't handle it. The guys stood and tried to find a way out, each offering their own idea. Harry declares that we need to try all the methods. Time is really running out. The heroes try again and again to win. They didn't succeed. Steve had already lost hope of winning. Harry thinks to the end about how to rectify the situation. The man noticed the monster's ability to shrink after each blow, but becomes stronger. Sarah decides to do something. Harry looks at her, not understanding. The girl's ability may perhaps help in this situation. Sarah becomes completely immersed in her ability, directs his energy towards the giant, which completely surrounds him. Harry hears that he needs to be careful. The giant flies towards the man at full speed. Sarah grabs the man and pushes him aside. Harry doesn't understand where the giant got such speed. Harry turns to the girl and says it's good that she's with him. Otherwise, things would be bad for them. While the heroes desperately fight the giants, Taylor stands there with his fist to his chin. The guy's head was filled with various thoughts. Without stopping to think, the hero cannot understand how the time that Olivia voiced is related to their abilities. Finally, after several minutes of reflection, Taylor came to a conclusion. The giant felt something and turned his head to the side. The giant began to burn with fire. Harry stands in shock. The fire had no effect on the monster. Steve is sure that their death is very close. They cannot win. An enraged Harry flies towards the giant, shouting that there is no reason to give up yet. The man throws a blow with his big hand. Harry is very surprised. The giant fights back and hits the man with all his might, causing him to fly away and blood to come out of his mouth. The man lies on the ground with many injuries, thinking that they no longer have a way out. Tired of fighting, Steve decides to leave the game. Sarah looks at Taylor, not understanding why he used his power. After all, there is another way out. Taylor knew this situation could happen. Spreading his hands, Taylor said, "The third exam began an hour later, although the first two began immediately." Olivia herself gave a hint, which was to conduct an exam, the duration of which was not 10 minutes but a whole hour. Steve didn't understand what Taylor was getting at. The hero is confident that this test is aimed at testing their strength, so everyone must contribute to victory. Taylor gave instructions. Sarah must distract the giant so Steve can strike. The baboon will be forced to throw the fat man on top of him. The giant senses their attack. The monster comes on the offensive and delivers a blow that hits Steve in the stomach. The fat man is maddened by how the giant noticed them. They acted from a blind spot. Above Steve, the queen comes to attack. Bella lands a strong blow to the giant's head. The monster crumbled into pieces, and Taylor held part of its head. The examiners watched the children pass the test. Bob, clapping his hands, congratulated them on successfully completing the round. Bob began to like Taylor more and more. Half a month passed after passing the exam in the Union. Steve and Taylor were walking in the park. Taylor followed the fat man eating ice cream and thought about something. Suddenly, the hero stopped and screamed loudly, which scared Steve. The guy could be heard far beyond the city. There was intense fighting in the city every day, but the area where Steve and Taylor were patrolling was very quiet. Olivia said this area would suit them. Angry, Taylor accused Olivia of cheating. Steve was happy about the salary that they would be paid, even if they were not doing anything. Wasn't that great? Such a salary is nothing for Taylor. He needs more to finally earn $1 billion. It would be better if they were given tasks to kill Emperor-level monsters, for which they pay hundreds of times more. Steve was surprised by his words because they were unlikely to be able to defeat such a monster. The fat man moved, saying finally, so that he does not dream ahead of time. First, he needs to accumulate enough points to move up to a higher level. Taylor decides to call Olivia via video call. The girl answers the call, the guy greets her. Olivia asks about the reason for his call. The hero tells her about changing the area. The girl refuses him and hangs up. Taylor calls a familiar number. Sarah answers his call immediately. Taylor offers to switch areas with her. Hearing that the girl is against it and hung up, the guy becomes furious. How dare she do this to me? I didn't lend her Shawnee to hang up. Having calmed down a little, Taylor and the Steves went on their walk. The guy pulls out the game, telling Taylor it would be nice to play it when they get back. The tape shows 3 girls with dyed hair, white blouses, and black skirts. Taylor looks at Steve, who is watching the game. The guy tisks and says he doesn't care. For no apparent reason, Taylor takes off and runs away somewhere. Taylor sends him to the Union to tell them their mistake in sending him to this area where not a damn thing is happening. Local residents relax and sunbathe on the beach. A girl with blue hair poses for the camera. At this time, Sarah, Harry, and Bella are completing a task. Sarah picks up her phone. The war looks at its rating. She's interested to know about Taylor's score. Taylor is determined. He is ready to take on the task, even with a 0 warrior rating. 2 wounded people call for help. One of them asks for reinforcements to the 5th district. A white werewolf, a normal-level monster, is moving towards them. The werewolf looked back at something. A hand was visible in the light that appeared. She struck the monster, causing it to fall to the ground. The 2 warriors did not understand who struck the werewolf, since there was no one in the room except them. Various creatures kept advancing on the city. The yellow rank warriors who were involved in the owl matter decide to join forces to defeat the top rank monsters. The animal lets out a roar as it is pierced by fiery flames. The girl cannot believe her eyes. Only a warrior of black rank can have such an ability. Looking at the receding beam of light, the man responded with refusals. It is not typical for black-ranked warriors to do such things. Taylor hurried to find his next victim. Against the backdrop of the endless sea, the guy was photographing the girl. Through the camera lens, he noticed that there was something in the distance.
A megalodon, a monster of the level of earthly demons, emerged from the depths of the sea.
People began to run away in horror. Taylor receives a notification on his phone about the appearance of a megalodon of the level of earthly demons in the 16th region. The guy is surprised by this title. The hero receives a new notification on his phone, which says that all black rank warriors are asked to immediately arrive at the scene and deal with the huge Tiangang-level octopus. He puts the phone in his pocket, takes off into the sky. Arriving at the place, Taylor notices a huge octopus in the sea, which looks out from the surface of the water. The octopus is angry with the locals. They are poisoning the waters and killing the sea inhabitants. He captured an entire ship with his tentacle. Taylor stands on the surface of the water with fiery flames emanating from him. The guy raises his eyes and looks the monster straight in the eyes. The hero rises in front of him. The octopus prepares its tentacles to strike. Taylor turns her energy against him. The fiery wave barely touches the octopus's tentacles, from which blood gushes. The octopus screams in pain. Out of anger, the octopus directs its power in the form of many sharks at Taylor. The animal wants to end it as quickly as possible. Holding 2 fingers up, Taylor decides to use the fire technique. The hero is surprised at his mistake. Taylor decides to unleash several times more fire. The guy emanates very strong energy that can boil the whole sea. Nothing will stop Taylor from attacking the octopus. The hero snaps his fingers. The fiery flame covered him entirely. The octopus almost melted from the heat and let out a terrible scream. Taylor covered his ears from his heartbreaking screams. Pointing fingers, Taylor ordered him to shut up. Blood oozed from the octopus's jaw and spread over its teeth. Taylor's fiery flame pierced right through the animal. The monster intended to eat him and scatter his bones all over the seabed. Taylor just grinned at this. Looking at the guy, the octopus thinks about his incredible ability, which he will not be able to overcome. The animal intends to leave. Taylor is a strong opponent. He cannot cope with him. The octopus states that before he could easily exterminate half the city, but now a strong enemy has come from somewhere who can take away his life, which is more important to him. Taylor also said that he would find him sooner or later. He couldn't hide from him. The octopus began to hide behind the sea wave. Gradually, the wave plunged him underwater. The octopus disappeared completely from Taylor's sight. Having still not dealt with the octopus, the guy decides to go on the next mission. In the distance, you can see the city that was captured by the megalodon. Taylor goes there. A sea wave quickly fills the city. People are trying to escape in panic. The mouth of a huge megalodon appears from the roofs of houses. The impact speed of the wave destroys buildings. A mother with a child in her arms looks at all this in horror. A wonderful warrior, Felix, comes to the rescue. He rushes straight towards the megalodon, uses his power to stop a giant wave. He uses his heavenly spear. But something went wrong, causing the hero to frown. The sounds of a helicopter flying are heard in the sky. In the helicopter, a girl correspondent tells the news about the incident taking place in the city. The guy with the spear in his hands thinks that he has defeated the sea beast. His eyes widen when he spots a live megalodon. The helicopter crashes and is pulled down. Felix got angry. It was much more difficult for him to use his power in the air, and the helicopter also suffered from it. Holding the spear in one hand, he hits the ground with the other. The space around him immediately begins to burn with an orange flame. Aiming his spear, Felix flies straight into the megalodon's mouth. Someone's silhouette is visible behind his tail. Taylor calls out to the megalodon. The hero emanates incredible energy. Taylor tenses his arms very hard, causing the veins to appear on his arm. The hero aims his fist to strike. The giant fish screams in pain. The spear pierces the thick body, from which blood flows like a fountain. Felix stands on the body of a defeated megalodon. Meanwhile, the correspondent and his cameraman are trying to get out of the crashed helicopter. The girl looks at the guy standing on the megalodon and asks him to give her an interview. Felix assures that there is no need for this. He has more important things to do. The girl looks with loving eyes at the retreating guy holding his weapon in his hand. With his hands in his pockets, Taylor walks along the road with a light gait. The reporter was interested in the walking guy. Taylor opens apps on her phone screen to see if there are any other rescue missions. He is extremely surprised all the monsters in the city have been removed, so there are no more missions. Taking his eyes away from the phone, the hero intends to do something. Taylor heads to the Union to collect his earnings. Bella, sitting on Harry's shoulders, and Sarah climb the stairs to the Union building. The heroes walk and talk about something. Bella touches Harry's hair and says enthusiastically, "It would be cool if they were like 2 warriors who defeated a megalodon and an octopus." Having entered the tasks, the heroes notice Taylor walking along the corridor. The guys approach him and intend to find out what he is doing here. Taylor answers them directly, without hiding anything. He came to collect the earnings that he should be paid for killing the megalodon and the octopus. The hero laughed wildly, asking how much they could pay him for this. Holding her head in her hand, the girl thought. Sarah became serious, picked up her phone, and showed the guy the news. Taylor came closer to get a good look. What was written on the screen gave him a big shock. The news reported about the war, who was able to defeat 2 strong monsters, and it was not Taylor. Looking at the guy, Sarah told him that it was not good to take credit for other people's merits. It would be better if he studied more and knew the basic rules that would help him in his future struggle. Taylor didn't understand what rules the girl was talking about. He made a gloomy face, and Sarah asked him what he actually does in the lessons, where they explain in detail all the rules and skills that a real warrior should master. During training sessions, the guy sleeps peacefully, drooling a lot and making a ball of snot. Clasping her hands, Sarah reminded him of the old conversation when she told him that he would not become a warrior. At the current situation between Sarah and Taylor, Harry looks at them and is touched. Sarah explains to Taylor the rules before killing a monster. You need to accept the task, and if the task has not been made public, then you need to take a photo of the enemy and send it to the Union for consideration. And if the Union approves, only then can you kill the monster. Sarah also explained to him about the rank system, which is assigned to each monster depending on the strength it possesses. The rank is needed so that the warriors understand whether they can cope with them or not. Taylor realized that with his fire gift ability, he could only count on ordinary level monsters. Harry added that there is no need to try to destroy a monster one or more ranks higher. The Union will consider this a violation of the rules. Taylor despaired of such rules, because he was sent to an area where there were no monsters, and he could only change after 365 days. Grabbing his head, Taylor screamed there was no way he could go back to his home. Everyone was surprised by his words. No one understood what they meant. Taylor told them the whole truth. His parents sent him here so that he would earn 1 billion rubles in 3 years. Otherwise, he would not be able to return home. Bella and Harry were shocked by his story. Then they laughed wildly, thinking that this was complete nonsense. Harry put his hand on Sarah's shoulder. He told the girl to stay close to Taylor. Sarah rolled her eyes. The girl spread her arms to the sides and loudly said to stop shipping them. She didn't like Taylor at all. Sarah said, how can anyone fall in love with him? He behaves rudely and is only interested in money. Slamming his fist against his other hand, Taylor made up his mind. The 3 guys looked at him in surprise. The guy approached Sarah and extended his hand to her. The girl looked in amazement at the hand extended to her. Taylor wants to receive the amount that Sarah promised to pay him for the completed task with the owl. The girl was greatly amazed by his words. The guy reminded the girl of all the cases for which the girl owes him. Sarah said his name through her teeth. Out of anger, the girl forcefully pushed the guy away, causing him to fly high into the sky. Taylor somehow managed to get the card from Sarah, so he went to a nearby bank to withdraw money. Seeing the balance in the account, Taylor became sad at this rate. He would not soon have to return to his homeland. An unknown man entered the bank. It was Richard, the Earth-level warrior. The man stood behind the next terminal. For some reason, this began to stress Taylor. Richard reached into his trouser pocket. I took out an incomprehensible thing from there. This thing turned out to be a badge confirming that its owner is an Earth-level warrior. Taylor glanced sideways at Richard. The guy spies on him, wants to know the amount that a warrior of this rank receives for his work. The hero goes out into the street, where the guys meet him. Sarah noticed Taylor's deteriorating mood. He was upset about the amount in Richard's account. The guy shed tears when he realized that he would never get that kind of money. Harry told him that everything is still ahead. Everyone started somewhere. The main thing is not to give up. Then everything will work out, and soon you will receive the rank of a heavenly warrior. Bella exclaimed that she also wanted that rank. Harry also wished her luck in this. As a sign of support, the man took the guy by the shoulders and told him not to lose heart over trifles. Bella, Sarah, and Harry began to leave. Taylor, with his head down like a delinquent schoolboy, trudged after them. The heroes came to the nearest cafe. Sarah was annoyed that she was sitting with Taylor. 3 warriors were sitting at the next table, including Richard. Taylor overheard their conversation. Turning around, he recognized the man from the bank. A warrior in a blue shirt asks Richard to tell him how he killed the octopus. The man promised to tell me, but first he would go to the toilet. Standing in the toilet, Richard was thinking about how to answer the question because he had absolutely nothing to tell. Looking in the mirror, the man was angry. Suddenly, Taylor appeared behind the man and asked if he had taken the reward for killing the octopus. Richard, frowning, looked back at the guy. Looking closely at the man, Taylor insistently asked to give him the reward for killing the octopus. The guy added that it was his merit, since he tried to cut the sea creature into pieces. The man was amazed by Taylor's serious attitude. Richard told him that he was not mature enough to cope with a monster several ranks higher than him, and that it was not at all good to take credit for the merits of others. Taylor was furious and decided to forcefully extract his reward from him. The man covered his face with his hands and laughed loudly. After a minute of laughter, Richard looked up seriously at Taylor, saying that he didn't understand who he was talking to. He was an Earth-level warrior, popularly called invincible. Taylor absolutely doesn't care who Richard is. He is determined to take his reward at any cost. The man felt provocation from the guy, so he warned him not to expect mercy. Richard ordered him to prepare for death.
Taylor likes this arrangement. He just wanted to evaluate the strength of a warrior of this rank. Richard held out his hand, asking him to stop. The man told him that such a place is not suitable for battles, since they can harm others. He suggests finding a more suitable place for this. The hero, throwing up his hands, said that Richard should not worry. There is no one here except them, since a request was sent to the Union regarding the fact that an Earth-level monster is here. The man got angry. Taylor was determined to set all this up. The warrior flew at the guy. Taylor raised his sword into the air. Something struck Richard. Taylor's bright purple canvas of power began to move towards Richard, causing him to shout for the guy to stop. The hero was irritated by the man's cowardice. Richard spoke about his illness, ophthalmopathy, which prevents him from looking into bright light. The man put on black glasses. Through his glasses, he scanned Taylor's profile to find out who he was. Richard was horrified when he saw red signs warning that this man was extremely dangerous. The man thinks to run away because in such an unequal fight, everything can end very badly and very quickly, and his glasses show an exorbitant level of strength that cannot be measured with a specific number he sees an infinity sign. At that same second, the man breaks away and runs away from the toilet. Richard ran out into the street and screamed. There was a crowd of people on the street that scared him, because if Taylor came out and told the truth, his life would end. The man is nervous, deciding whether to confess everything to him or not. Behind Richard appears the purple shadow of a guy holding a sword in his hand. The man tries to run away from him, but he doesn't succeed. Taylor appears right in front of him. Richard, having lost all hope, lowers his head, asks for forgiveness, and gives him a reward of 1 million. Looking at the man, Taylor asks why he didn't confess sooner. Richard asks the guy not to tell anyone about the situation. Taylor decides to find out why Richard took someone else's award for himself. Raising his hands up, the man begins to tell, promising that the story will be long. Since childhood, he was a sociopath, always studied well, received excellent grades. Everyone at school bullied him. A classmate was sitting at the back desk and planning something. One thought occurred to him. It was a sunny day, so all the school children were having a physical education lesson on the sports ground. Richard alone sat in an empty classroom and wrote notes in his notebook. Suddenly a basketball hits him on the head. A school gang entered the classroom, and its leader told Richard that he was annoyed by nerds like him. But what Richard really wanted was to find friends and have fun with them. That's why he came up with the idea of becoming a warrior. The man went to all the training sessions. His muscles began to gradually grow, but for some reason he was always eliminated from all the exams. At the end of the story, Richard bowed his head and said, he decided to cheat and take the award for himself, because he wanted to be noticed, to earn the recognition of people. When a man saw a dying octopus, he filmed it on camera as if he had killed it and sent the video to the Union, which is why he was awarded this award. With the help of the award, Richard managed to gain respect from people. Everyone began to smile at him and communicate with him. After listening to the man's story, Taylor states whether he's afraid if the guy tells his story to everyone, to which the man replies that he doesn't care anymore. Richard later added that although he has no friends, he is not alone at heart. Taylor laughed cheerfully. The man had already regretted telling him his story. Richard felt better in his soul. At least he was able to tell someone his problem, which had tormented him for many years. Richard says he doesn't know how long it will take him until he can get rid of his current image and become his old self. Change is always a little scary, but it's good that it has come. Taylor extended his hand to the man and agreed with his words. Richard looks at him questioningly, not understanding what is happening now, and how this could all turn out for him. Taylor says that Richard entrusted him with his secret. Then they are now friends and invites him to listen to his secret in return. He admits that he came to Earth from another world, the highest deity of which is his father. That is, he's the son of God. The man at first did not believe his words, but then the realization still overtook him, and he said that he was glad to make friends with a creature of such status and power. He said to Taylor, "Your Highness." Nobody had ever approached Taylor like that, and he was a little confused, trying to figure out whether he liked it or not. But then he understands for sure that this is not his and asks not to address him that way, calling Richard a fanatic. Taylor looks at Richard and asks him why he believed his words about the son. He could have lied. With a wink, the man says that since they are friends now, it's common to trust friends. Taylor is looking for some benefit in friendship with him. Still, the hero is interested in how the man found the corpse of the octopus. Richard takes off his glasses and gives them to Taylor, asking him to look at them. The guy puts on glasses and concentrates his gaze. Having put on the glasses, the hero looks at Richard and notices that these are completely unusual glasses, as they seem at first glance. Through the glasses, Taylor sees the scanning of Richard's personality, his skills, abilities, and various characteristics. The man explains that he himself invented these glasses in order to quickly analyze who your opponent is. Taylor was very impressed with the invention and says he now clearly understands why Richard decided to run away so quickly. The hero saw on the screen the inscription "checking spiritual something," and he became interested in what it meant. Richard explained that this sensor determines the pressure of the opponent. If the opponent is strong, then Then high pressure comes from him, which few can feel. Taylor decided to inquire about his points, while Richard was also looking into his status. The man did not tell him his glasses, since Taylor is a heavenly level warrior. The data about him is still incomplete, since warriors of this rank are extremely rare. The guy decided, apparently that's why Richard decided that another warrior killed the octopus. The man, lowering his head, answered negatively. Taylor looked at him through his glasses, puzzled. Richard tried to explain that when he saw the mutilated octopus, he thought that the wounds on its body could have been left by a person. But since no one applied for the reward, the man decided that perhaps they both died. The man felt ashamed that he did not know that such a merit belonged to Taylor, and without his knowledge, he appropriated his award to himself. Richard clenched his fists in anger. He just wanted to earn a call to wipe the nose of one warrior who wants Richard to be demoted. Therefore, a man tries to achieve his calling in various ways. Taylor was thinking about something. The hero decided to ask how the man knew him. The guy thought that his charming beauty could do the trick. Richard explained that he tries to make friends with everyone new to the Union in order to fool them in the future and dump all his responsibilities on them. But he assured Taylor that this did not apply to him, since he was a real monster. The man laughed loudly. The guy decided to blame the Union rules for everything. Looking at the guy with his hands on his belt, Richard said the rules were invented after he fraudulently became a warrior. Taylor was amused by the man's action. The hero asked the man not to give him all his tasks. This way he can get twice as much money for tasks. Covering his face with his hands, Richard decided to confess everything to the Union and asked Taylor if this was a good idea. Taylor grabbed the man. He said that since they were friends, they should trust each other. Taylor told him to hold off on confessing to the Union for now. They had more important things to do. Looking at the guy, Richard agreed. The hero raised his hands up. Now great things await them. Richard has decided not to confess to the Union what happened. An unknown man spoke up and asked what Richard should confess. Richard recognized the man who owned the voice and looked at him over his shoulder in horror. A man was looking at Richard and Taylor with his hands in his pocket. The man turned out to be Felix, who had arrived here as it was reported that a monster had been discovered here that had caused great damage. The men look at each other. Felix guessed that the situation about the monster was a lie, and realized that Taylor was involved in this, so he threatened him with a fine that the Union could issue for his trick if he found out about it. Taking a step forward, Richard asks Felix to get out of here. Looking at Richard with angry eyes, Felix said that he was comfortable keeping Taylor with him. While listening to the conversation between the two men, Taylor had the idea that he might be expelled from the Union. The guy touched Richard's shoulder with his finger. The man looked back at him. Taylor whispered in his ear that he really could be expelled from the Union for violating the rules. Pointing his finger at the guy, Richard replied that all the rules are explained in detail in lessons on training future warriors. Taylor scratched his head and smiled sweetly. The man reassured the guy, saying that as long as he was next to him, he might not be afraid of anything. The hero did not understand what a man could do to protect him. Richard smiled widely. Felix doesn't like the two men's whispers. He demands to be explained in detail about the current situation. Enraged, Richard raises his voice at Felix, telling him to stop pestering them. Continuing to look at Felix, the man tells him that he competes with him because he respects only the strongest and always strives to take only first place. With his hands folded in front of him, Richard added, Felix is very envious. He can't stand anyone who is even one step ahead of him. Felix grinned at his words and said that in 2 years of work in the Union, he had never seen him fight monsters. The guy is furious. He no longer intends to talk to the person for whom glory is most important. Seething with anger, Felix tells the man, Richard, that he doesn't deserve his respect. Richard offers to measure his strength with him, because he understands that this is why he came here. Without the slightest hesitation, Felix agrees to the proposal. The man offers him a bet whoever destroys the most monsters this month wins. The guy agrees to his proposal, and predicts that Richard will lag very far behind him and his defeat will be devastating. Taking his spear in his hands, Felix left. There is no trace of the guy. Richard was glad that Felix had left, since if passions had only been a little more intense, they would have had to fight seriously. Taking Taylor by the shoulder, the man asked him to help him win the argument, because he couldn't handle it on his own. Since their clash could lead to bad consequences, the guy was not against helping him in this matter. Because for Taylor, this is an easy matter. Richard is confident that with Taylor's help he will be able to win Felix's bet, and he says that his head works well, unlike his muscles. Both men laughed, and Taylor said that you can fool people with muscles and pinched Richard's arm. Taylor had to solve something with a false denunciation to the Union about the presence of a monster here, because he could be expelled for perjury, so he asks Richard for help. The man said not to worry ahead of time. He would go to the Union and find out everything. The city was bombed by monsters, and in some areas barriers were posted with the sign "No Entry Allowed." The young people stood and looked at the remaining ruins of the city. The young warrior exclaimed enthusiastically about his find. On his phone, he opened Sarah's profile, which provided all of her personal information. The warriors looked closely at her profile. Jace saw Sarah and her friend standing nearby. At this time, the guys stood and waited for the return of Taylor, who went to the toilet about 40 minutes ago. Jace walked closer to Sarah and told her not to worry about Taylor because Richard was next to him, which meant he was fine. The guy looked at the girl with a gaze. To his words, Sarah replied that she was calm for her friend. Rubbing his temple, the guy introduced himself. His name is Jace. He joined the Union a year earlier than them and offered her his help if she had any questions. The girl was surprised that he was older than her. Sarah wanted to introduce herself, but she didn't have time. She was interrupted. The guy knows her name, since he has been watching her for quite a long time. Sarah was surprised. James's friend told Harry that Jace had just found out the girl's name. Harry looked thoughtfully at the second warrior, whose name was Robert. The man remembered how Olivia once asked him why he wanted to join the Union, to which he replied that he wants to protect people. It is his civic duty. But in fact, there was another reason why Harry joined the Union. From the thick fog, the silhouettes of two men began to be seen, gradually approaching. James introduced Sarah to his brother Richard, who always helps him in any situation. Taylor stood behind Richard. Sarah was worried and asked Taylor if everything was okay. The hero told her that everything was fine with him. The girl became furious. She was irritated by absolutely every word the guy said. Pointing the guy to his brother, James told Taylor that if it weren't for James, he would have been eaten by the monster long ago. The two men looked at each other. Richard turned around and began to walk away, calling James with him. The man began to leave. James shouted after him that he had not yet taught Taylor a lesson so that he would no longer come into their sight. The three men left the boys and walked away. Stopping, James told them that Sarah may be in love with Taylor. He could not understand why. Taylor is not the man she needs. Richard boiled with anger and asked Richard to leave the guys alone. At this time, news was shown in the city, in which the TV presenter Mia talked about all the events that had happened in the city over the past few days. There was a crowd of people on the street. They organized rallies over dissatisfaction with the work of the soldiers. Citizens shouted that they wanted better protection for the city. Owl, who had been hiding in one of the high-rise apartments all this time, sat in a cafe and watched the news. Olivia entered the cafe and approached the man. The man did not understand why she invited him to meet. Olivia looked at him and said that Taylor had left town. The girl sat down on a chair and continued the conversation. She said that Taylor, along with James, an Earth-level warrior, had gone to another city to complete a mission. Placing her hand to her cheek, Olivia told Owl that they should be careful. She thought Taylor was up to something if he was able to contact a warrior of a rank higher than him. The girl handed the box with a fresh sample of the monster's blood to the owl. Looking at Olivia, the man said that soon he would be able to create a new person, similar to a warrior, but which will look like a monster. After talking with Olivia, Owl left the cafe and went to his home. The man felt that someone was following him and turned around sharply, thinking that he would catch his pursuer. The owl stopped, and suddenly a cloud of purple matter began to gather behind him, which began to concentrate at one point, as if it were some kind of portal. Suddenly, a man in a white suit and purple hair appeared from an unknown matter. He was very calm. Holding one hand in his pocket, he moved towards the owl. Not understanding what is happening, Owl activates his powers and is about to attack the stranger. The owl does not know who is in front of him, what his strength is, and what his goal is, so he decides to launch a strong attack and defeat his opponent with one blow. However, something happened that Owl never expected. His powerful attack was stopped by just one finger of the stranger. At the same time, the block with one finger turned out to be so strong that the owl was thrown back. Looking at the early one, the guy grinned at how Sova, who had his group destroyed and lost his arm, could turn into such an unfortunate person. Turning around, the guy said that he was not the one who needed to be attacked because they should be allies. The owl, narrowing his eyes, intended to find out who this impudent guy was. In response to his words, the guy showed his tattoo on his arm in the form of a famous pattern. The stranger replied that he had evolved. The hero introduced himself. His name is Denny. Far from the city, there were incredible landscapes, green mountain ranges, between which there was a small village, and a railway along which a train was rushing somewhere into the distance. The voices of our heroes were heard in the dining car. Taylor and Richard were sitting at the table and had a pleasant conversation about something. A girl in a service uniform brought the guys the food they ordered. Richard, holding a piece of meat on sticks, teaches Taylor how to eat it properly. The man said, "You need to dip it in the sauce first, and then worry carefully." Taylor looks at Richard with contempt, but he still decides to try and puts one piece into his mouth. Taylor really enjoyed it and reached a high level of bliss. The taste made the guy salivate from his mouth, which he almost choked on. Richard decided to inquire about his condition. Taylor replied that he had never tried anything like this. At this time, a young man is sitting at the next table and looking at the food brought to him. Felix does not dare try it, fearing poisoning. But everyone takes one piece of meat and dips it in the sauce. Then he puts it in his mouth, and Felix is bursting with the spiciness of the dish, his whole face turning red. An employee of the restaurant carriage was concerned about the passenger's condition and offered to help him. Felix said he was fine and didn't need help. Hearing a familiar voice, the men turned their heads towards the source of the sound. With a full cheek, Taylor told Richard what Felix was doing there. Richard would like to know for himself what Felix forgot here. The heroes continue to calmly finish their food in the hope that the guy sitting at the next table will not notice them. The last piece of meat remained on the plate. The heroes simultaneously grabbed it and stared into each other's eyes. Suddenly, the train began to brake sharply. Taylor doesn't understand what happened. An unknown person was sitting in the train driver's cabin while two men lay on the floor with a broken head. The unknown man was holding in his hands the wind armor of a foreign beast that looked like a rat. Richard was looking out the window when he suddenly noticed something that looked like a rat fly past and fall to the ground. The man shouted that it was a spiritual beast. This beast turned out to be a divine-level rhinoceros. Taylor looked at this rhinoceros and said that he would go down the drain. The guy wanted to go and deal with the beast, but Richard stopped him, saying that first he needed to ensure the safety of the train and passengers. The heroes still noticed each other. Richard came to the conclusion that this animal was someone's foundling. Suddenly, a man enters the dining car and holds a spiritual beast in his hands. The hero introduces himself. His name is Edward. Having looked around those present in the carriage, the man chose his opponent, and his gaze settled on Richard and Felix. Felix told Richard and Taylor that he would take care of the rhinoceros and they would take care of Edward. Richard addressed the passengers, saying that he would be able to protect them because he was an Earth-level warrior. The passengers were very happy, because danger was very close and protection was even closer, and could not have come at a better time. Richard looked at the unknown man and asked who he was. The stranger said with a malicious smile, "He is the one who will kill them all today." At his words, Taylor grinned and asked if the stranger was sure of what he had just said. The hero directed his fire technique against him, using only a limited part of his strength because they continued to be in a train filled with passengers. Edward began to defend himself, and the firestorm from Taylor disappeared somewhere. It turns out that he knows how to absorb the abilities of others, and moreover, respond to opponents with their own strength. The antagonist began to scream. His powers increased thanks to Taylor's attack, because he absorbed a lot of his energy. The guy called Edward the scum of society and was about to show him his place. The man was ready to fight him. He was very serious and stared at Taylor, not taking his eyes off him. Edward laughed wildly and very loudly. He seemed to feel his strength as something unsurpassed. The man flew at Taylor to strike him again. Edward struck with the same force he absorbed from Taylor. The guy is surprised by such a rare gift, because the ability to return the power of one's own opponent is almost never found in anyone. But Taylor does not intend to give up. He decides to use great force against Edward, which he certainly cannot handle. The guy punches Edward and their fists collide together, shaking the air around them with a strong shockwave. The man cannot cope with Taylor's strength and does not understand why the guy's strength has grown more. Looking straight into Edward's eyes, Taylor says his fire collided with something taller than him. Edward did not despair because now he had absorbed even more power from Taylor, and a purple aura appeared around his fiery hand, just like the main character. The man gains even more strength, causing the veins in his arms to swell. Smiling maliciously, he intends to completely absorb Taylor's fire. He likes the guy's strength and will do this with great pleasure. The bad guy is sure that Taylor will never understand what is going on, and without realizing it, he will transfer all his power to him. He directs his bloodthirsty monsters at the guy, who quickly fly from all sides. The hero understands that the fight is beginning to gain momentum and makes the next decision. At the same moment, Taylor materializes his sword and says that the final showdown is still very far away. The guy understands that now is the time to become more serious, because his opponent has very unusual abilities. Taylor rushes into the attack, picking up unprecedented speed and goes behind the big man's back, managing to make dozens of blows per second. Each of the strikes struck reached their target, but Edward did not even budge. On the contrary, real passion lit up in his eyes. Edward begins to laugh triumphantly as he grows stronger again, feeling Taylor's strength against him. He is simply inflated with anger and hatred. The man crosses his arms in front of him. He intends to absorb even more power and boasts that he is immune to all spiritual attacks and is a true martial artist. Richard is amazed by Edward's strength and realizes that now he will have to come up with a plan on the fly. The man suddenly realized something. Taylor asked what exactly. Richard noticed that when he attacked him, Edward became stronger each time. Taylor suggested blowing it up since such an ability should have a limit, to which Richard said that the train was full of people. Blowing it up would be a big problem. The guy wondered what percentage of Edward's spiritual level was, so that he could calculate the radius of the explosion so as not to harm the passengers. Richard looked through his glasses, which could display all the data about a person, but why they could not determine Richard's level. Taylor suggested that perhaps Edward was so strong that even the glasses could not detect his strength. In this case, it will be difficult for Taylor to blow up the train without injuring anyone. Richard said they could get help from Felix, who is from an ancient martial arts family. Taylor heard something like this from Felix once. The man explained to him that spiritual power had not been so developed before, so all the protection of the population lay in the hands of the ancient martial arts clans who fought the monsters. But later, many began to develop abilities, and everyone forgot about the ancient clans. Taylor wondered if Felix could really use the magic of the ancient arts to fight Edward and his rhinoceros. Richard was sure Felix could handle it. We need to give him a chance. Edward was getting closer and closer to one girl, causing her to shake in fear. The man grabbed her hand and pulled her towards him. Taylor and Richard were in some shock. Taking the girl hostage, Edward said why he should give his life for the sake of some people. The girl started crying. She asked the man not to touch her. Edward smiled at her. He took some kind of test tube out of his pocket and held it in his hand. The man forced the hostage to drink the contents of the test tube, whispering in her ear that she could become a new person. And you can gain new strength. Scratching the back of his head, Taylor had no idea what Edward was talking about. Richard explained that 10 years ago, there was one group that formed an alliance to fight the League of Fighters for real. It seems they have now reunited to continue this matter. Taylor thought that only he would have an additional source of income. Richard, fixing his gaze on Taylor, continued, "The League of Fighters believes that their priority is to destroy the Society of Celestial Evolution, and not to kill animals. The man is against Taylor joining this organization." Taylor suddenly remembered Sarah when she fought with the owl and looked like a real monster. At this time, the owl was talking to Denny. Denny said that he was here because of Sarah, since the girl was very interested in him. The guy is sure that the girl can become the new Eve of this world. On the train, a frightened passenger decided to drink an unknown liquid so that Edward would not do anything bad to her. Taylor takes off, knocks the test tube out of Edward's hands. Now it ends up in Taylor's hands. The guy saves the girl. Taylor looks at Edward and says the battle between them is not over yet. The man thinks the guy is joking. Edward is about to strike. Taylor uses her energy to defend herself from the man's blow. Edward orders the guy to fight him. Taking a few steps away from the man, Taylor calls out to him. At the same moment, he throws the girl in the test tube. The girl falls right in Richard's hand. The girl screamed in surprise and partly in fear. The man caught the test tube and held it in his teeth. Taylor rushed into battle with Edward. The guy decides what to do. If he uses his spiritual power, Edward will swallow it. He needs to look for some other way out. With a new surge of strength, the man rushes into battle. Edward punches Taylor in the air. The guy moves away, and he intercepts the hand that is healing him. Taylor has his opponent's powerful arm in his hand, but his other hand is in Edward's. The man throws Taylor away with all his might. The guy landed on the hard floor and grimaces from pain that breaks his whole body. The angry man intends to strike again. He raises his arms to strike. Taylor tries to get to his feet to confront him. The guy looks at his hand from which blood is coming. Taylor decides to use his power against him. He flies up to him with the words that he will kill him, and inflicts the final fatal blow on him.